Marcus Vale limped across the jagged surface of Corin 7, cursing the day the fleet had sent him on a routine recon mission. The sand beneath his boots crunched with a sound like brittle glass, and somewhere far above, the sun, a sickly green disk that made every shadow look like it had teeth, blew its heat across the scarred battlefield. He squinted through the dust, muttering to himself about how nobody in high command ever considered the emotional trauma of tripping over your own rifle while being shot at. A stray pulse beam sizzled past, lighting up the sky in a dull violet flash. "Yep," he said to no one, just the usual Monday. That's when he saw the tent. It was small, tattered, and flapped absurdly in the sulfuric wind, like it was trying to run away from the planet itself. Marcus approached cautiously, hand hovering over his blaster. The battlefield had been a graveyard of both human and alien tech, twisted metal and scorched plasma conduits littering every step, yet this one corner remained untouched, as if someone or something had pressed pause on chaos. Inside, he found her. She was lying on a pile of makeshift blankets, pale as a moonbeam, her long ears twitching slightly, catching noises Marcus didn't even realize existed. He froze, trying not to panic. The ears were the first thing you noticed, elegant and absurdly long, tapering like the finest alloy rods he'd seen in engineering labs. Not that he wanted to think about alloys while someone might be plotting to vaporize him. She breathed shallowly, and Marcus, being the gentleman and chaos magnet he was, muttered, "Okay, not your average battlefield casualty." He crouched beside her and tried to examine the injuries. Mostly she had scratches and burns that he could treat with some rationed medkits and duct tape, probably not the best medicine, but Corin 7 didn't exactly stock family doctors. She stirred, opening her eyes, pupils larger than a human's, glinting with intelligence and just enough humor to make Marcus feel like a fool. She gave a tiny, almost sarcastic smile. "You're inefficient," she whispered, her voice soft and melodic, carrying an accent he couldn't place. Marcus blinked. "I'm what now?" "You clean poorly," she said, then coughed, clearly amused at his expression. He shrugged. "Well, that's fair. I never claimed to be the hospital wing of intergalactic diplomacy." He rummaged for a medkit, accidentally dropping bandages on the sand. "Seriously, could you stay still for 2 seconds?" She raised an eyebrow, an actual sarcastic eyebrow, and it almost made Marcus laugh. "Almost. 2 seconds is optimistic," she said, flicking her wrist lazily. A faint glow shimmered from her fingertips, lifting the bandages into his hand. Marcus froze. "That's not supposed to happen," he muttered, eyes wide, trying to reconcile the sight of levitating bandages with the voice that sounded like a lullaby and a challenge at the same time. "I make exceptions for incompetence," she replied dryly. Marcus wasn't sure whether to be offended or grateful. "Great," he said, "then I'm honored." As he applied the bandages, she watched him with a gaze that made him feel simultaneously clever and completely ridiculous. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly, tilting her head in a way that made her ears sweep the air like sensors. Marcus blinked. Because I don't know, it's what people do when someone's lying on the floor, breathing funny." He realized mid-sentence that it sounded terrible. "I mean, not that you're breathing funny, okay, I'm stopping now." Her smile widened. "Humans are curious creatures, clumsy, loud, and unpredictable. And you're mysterious, long-eared, and also apparently deadly," Marcus ventured. She snorted softly, which was the closest thing she had to a laugh. "Deadly, perhaps. Inefficient, definitely." They stayed like that for hours, the sandstorm outside hammering the tent like it had a personal grudge. Marcus made jokes about alien fashion, noting that her long ears probably weren't aerodynamic. She countered with witty remarks about human footwear and the idiocy of magnetic combat boots that couldn't even survive a single crater. The air between them grew lighter, the tension easing with each sarcastic jab and improbable observation. Yet beneath the jokes there was a sharp awareness of danger. Marcus knew the battlefield outside wasn't going to wait while he played medic Sandalians. "You've seen battles like this before, haven't you?" he asked cautiously as he wiped plasma residue from his hands. "I have survived more than one," she said, her voice tinged with amusement. "Survival is informative." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Informative, that's one way to put it. I'd call it terrifying." Her ears twitched at his tone. "Perhaps terrifying is your perspective, from another vantage it is educational." He chuckled despite himself. Right. Next you'll tell me that getting shot at is a networking opportunity. Networking, she said with a mock solemnity, is underappreciated. Hours passed, and Marcus learned more from her cryptic hints than he did in weeks of military briefings. She could anticipate movement patterns, detect weak points in his makeshift barricades, and even suggested camouflage that involved nothing but shadows and a ridiculous amount of sand. Marcus implemented it reluctantly, half joking about becoming a sand sculptor if the plan failed. She watched, ears twitching, and commented dryly, "You resemble a sand sculpture already." That night, as the wind howled and the faint glow of distant starships flickered on the horizon, Marcus found himself talking more than he expected. He spoke of Earth, his childhood, the absurdity of interstellar bureaucracy, and even his terrible luck with alien cuisine. She listened, occasionally correcting his assumptions with sly humor that was impossible to be annoyed at. When he finally fell asleep against the tent wall, exhausted but oddly content, her hand brushed over the top of his pack, and a soft pulse of energy emanated, stabilizing the area from minor seismic tremors outside. When he woke, the battlefield was quieter. She sat across from him, legs folded, observing the horizon. "You should move soon," she said, "or perhaps I should carry you." Marcus groaned, not sure I'd survive being carried like a relic. Her ears twitched again as if considering it. "Perhaps you would, but it is untested." And just like that, Marcus realized two things. One, he was utterly dependent on this long-eared, sarcastic alien for survival, and two, he had no idea who or what she really was. And somehow, despite the absurdity, the danger, and the sand in places he didn't want sand, he felt safer than he had in weeks. Little did he know, the true revelation of her identity would turn his entire understanding of the war and his role in it upside down. But for now, jokes were safer than panic, and sarcasm was a shield as effective as any blaster. Marcus woke to a persistent, high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache, only to realize it was the alien woman's long ears twitching like twin radar dishes. She had been standing at the edge of the tent, scanning the horizon with a meticulous, almost comical seriousness, as if every grain of sand could be a sentient threat. He rubbed his eyes, muttering, "I knew caffeine would be easier than this," and watched as she tilted her head, her ears flicking in ways that seemed to communicate in a language only she understood. "Sleep well?" she asked, voice smooth, carrying that same sardonic humor that had gotten under his skin the day before. "Like a rock," Marcus replied, if the rock also had nightmares about exploding drones. She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched, which he considered close enough. "Exploding drones are trivial," she said. "It is the subtle annoyances that cause human error." Marcus groaned, "Great subtle annoyances. You mean like sand in your boots and the constant smell of burnt electronics?" "Precisely," she said, with a faint sparkle in her eyes. Then, with a sudden movement that made him flinch, she lifted a small, hovering drone from the edge of the tent with a subtle flick of her fingers, causing it to orbit her like an obedient pet. "And drones," she added, "are sometimes worse than sand." Marcus leaned back, shaking his head. "I don't even want to know how your species invented polite torture devices disguised as reconnaissance tools." "Polite is subjective," she replied, a hint of mischief in her voice. "Your species calls everything a problem, we call it entertainment." Their banter continued as they prepared to move. Marcus, still rubbing his stiff joints, tried to balance a heavy pack that seemed to defy gravity in its own subtly mocking way. She offered no help, only observations. "I notice you always overpack, it will slow you down. And I notice you hover like you invented the concept of being smug," he said, trying not to fall into the trap of sarcasm that seemed to fuel her amusement. She smirked, the faint glow in her pupils making him swear the universe was conspiring to make her look both terrifying and ridiculous at the same time. Their path led them across jagged ridges where the sand had congealed into strange crystal formations that hummed faintly when touched. Marcus tripped twice over his own feet, swearing each time, while she glided silently, occasionally flicking her hands to manipulate the faint energy fields that protected them from minor rock slides. "You could try paying attention," she said, "or accept the fact that you are structurally comedy in motion." "I'll have you know I am very graceful," he replied, almost falling again as he tried to maintain dignity. "You are an endangered species of grace," she said, tone so deadpan he had to laugh despite the situation. They reached a plateau where remnants of human and alien equipment lay twisted together, forming jagged sculptures that might have been art if anyone survived to appreciate it. She gestured to a nearby hovercraft half buried in sand. We can use that to cross the next canyon. It has an operational probability of 63.7%. Great 63.7. I'll take those odds over completely certain death, Marcus said, raising his pack in mock salute. She laughed then, a short, dry sound, and activated the hovercraft with an ease that left him blinking. The console lit up with symbols he didn't recognize, yet the craft responded perfectly, gliding across the canyon with a hum that made Marcus feel like he was riding inside a live circuit. He glanced at her, impressed despite himself. Seriously, do your ears come with instructions on how to manipulate alien technology? Instructions are unnecessary, she said. Ears detect the inconsistencies in the energy flow. Marcus didn't bother asking how ears could detect inconsistencies in energy flow. He had learned it was futile. The canyon crossing was punctuated by bursts of humor. Marcus, trying to balance the pack, accidentally nudged the emergency eject lever, which sent a small panel spinning off and narrowly missing them. She twitched her ears at the noise, commented dryly, "Human reflexes are hazardous." "I prefer the term dynamic," Marcus shot back. "Keeps life interesting." Once across, they found themselves facing a patrol of scavenger drones, more sophisticated than the ones they had seen before. Marcus began to panic, but she raised a hand, and a thin barrier of shimmering light rippled outward, stopping the drones in midair. "You worry too much," she said, watching the mechanical creatures vibrate against the field. "They are persistent but predictable." Marcus muttered, "Great. I always wanted a live demonstration of why humans are paranoid." "Paranoia is a survival skill," she replied, smirking, "though in your case it is overenthusiastic." They continued, moving through tunnels of crystallized sand that amplified every sound, forcing them to communicate with whispers that occasionally dissolved into awkward chuckles. She demonstrated subtle telekinetic manipulation to dislodge debris, always punctuating her actions with sharp, witty observations about human inefficiency. Marcus couldn't help but laugh when she levitated a boulder just enough to trip him, whispering, "You really need more practice in spatial awareness." At night, they camped in a hollowed-out cavern, the walls faintly luminescent, humming with energy that neither of them fully understood. Marcus attempted to start a fire with limited fuel and somehow set his own pack smoldering. She flicked her fingers, extinguishing it instantly, and muttered, "I see why survival is a human concern." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," he said, fanning smoke from his face. "Really motivates me." They shared sparse rations, and she, in a rare moment of quiet, offered stories of alien worlds, descriptions of floating cities, oceans of liquid crystal, and forests that sang with electromagnetic winds. Marcus listened, occasionally inserting human humor, like wondering if the fish there had bad breath, which made her laugh, a full, warm sound that made him feel absurdly alive on a barren, hostile planet. She noticed his fascination and teased him about his imagination, suggesting he might make a decent diplomat if he survived long enough. He countered with a jab about alien fashion sense, noting that her ceremonial robes probably violated half the known laws of physics for aesthetic purposes, which made her ears twitch in mock indignation. Their conversation deepened, though it remained laced with humor. Marcus realized she wasn't just intelligent. She could read strategy, anticipate threats, and manipulate energy in ways that made every human soldier on Corin 7 look like toddlers swinging sticks. Yet her jokes, sarcasm, and playful mockery made it impossible to feel intimidated, at least most of the time. Before dawn, Marcus drifted into a restless sleep, hearing her soft humming, and felt for the first time since the battle that perhaps, just perhaps, survival wasn't a solo sport. He woke to find her watching the horizon, ears flicking like twin sensors. "Time to move," she said, Marcus groaned. "Time to survive again, right?" "Yes," she said, tone humorously exasperated, "and try not to trip this time. It is tedious." He rolled his eyes, thinking she might be the most maddeningly competent, sarcastic, and oddly comforting ally he had ever encountered. And while he still had no clue who she really was, he knew one thing. Getting across Corin 7 alive would be an adventure full of danger, humor, and a queen who seemed to enjoy mocking his every misstep. Somehow that made him oddly optimistic. Marcus Vale crouched behind a jagged ridge, swearing under his breath as another patrol drone skimmed the sands below, its sensors scanning for heat and motion. Beside him, the alien woman, whose true presence he still hadn't fully comprehended, leaned casually against a rock, one long ear twitching as she adjusted the small, shimmering field that masked their heat signatures. "You worry too much," she said, voice carrying that same sardonic amusement that had been keeping him half sane since the battlefield. "I have a lot of practice worrying," Marcus muttered, adjusting the strap of his pack so it didn't dig into his shoulder. "Plus, I can't tell if these drones are going to shoot me or just politely offer me tea." "They do not offer tea," she replied dryly, though her lips quirked in a near smile. "Though that would be efficient." Marcus shook his head, trying not to laugh. "Well, I'll hold out hope. In the meantime, I assume you have a plan that doesn't involve me flailing around like a roasted rodent." "Flailing is predictable," she said, gesturing toward a hoverboard that had been lying half-buried in sand. "This is better." He eyed the device suspiciously. "Better, you say? Last time I trusted a piece of alien technology, I almost ended up in a crater singing to a drone." "That was educational," she said, lifting a hand and levitating a small panel of the hoverboard to his level. "Now try again with supervision." Grumbling, Marcus climbed aboard. She floated beside him, manipulating energy fields with subtle flicks of her fingers to stabilize the board. It hummed beneath him, responsive but temperamental. He wobbled dangerously and she couldn't resist a teasing comment. "Remarkable balance for someone with no prior training, truly inspiring if the goal is chaos." "Thanks," he muttered, gripping the board's controls. "I'll take that as a compliment." Their path led them into a canyon filled with twisted alien machinery, jagged shards of crystalline metal jutting at impossible angles. Marcus tried not to think about how easily they could impale him. She, by contrast, seemed to glide over the treacherous terrain with casual grace, ears twitching to sense shifts in energy and movement. "We'll need to be fast," she said. "The patrols are increasing frequency. You must focus on coordination rather than panic." "I am panicked in a focused way," Marcus said. "Does that count?" He snorted, barely acceptable. As they navigated the canyon, a sudden blast sent Marcus sprawling into a pile of alien debris. He groaned, expecting reprimand or frustration, but she merely twitched an ear and lifted him with an unseen force. "Still alive," she remarked. "I am impressed despite your clumsiness." "I'll take it," he said, dusting himself off. Clumsy and alive. The deeper they went, the more he began to notice the signs of her latent power. The subtle manipulation of gravitational fields, the way energy flickered in response to her thoughts, and the occasional tremor in the earth that she smoothed over with a gesture. Yet she kept the humor alive, teasing him about the ridiculousness of human pride. "You call that a heroic leap," she said as he jumped a small gap. "I call it comedy in motion." He glared but smiled. "You make it sound so dignified." When they reached the extraction point, a small spacecraft partially buried in sand, the reality of her identity finally began to hit him. She moved with command, flipping panels, realigning power conduits, and whispering commands in her melodic tongue that somehow made the ship obey as if it were alive. Marcus, in awe, muttered, You're more than anyone I could have imagined." She glanced at him, ears twitching in amusement. "You have discovered my truth." He blinked. "Wait, that's the alien queen." "Yes," she said casually, "though it seems you already suspected something more than a wounded stranger." He swallowed, feeling equal parts incredulous and foolish. "I mean, wow, that's a lot." "Indeed," she said, floating gracefully toward the ship, "and yet here we are." Marcus followed, still fumbling with his pack and hoverboard, and she couldn't resist another quip. "Perhaps you should take lessons in efficiency before accompanying royalty again." "I'll add that to my list," he said, smiling despite himself. As the ship lifted off, Marcus realized how much he had changed since finding her in that tent. He had begun the journey as a soldier, cautious and practical, skeptical of everything unfamiliar. Now he felt a strange confidence, the knowledge that survival was not just about strength or weaponry, but about trust, humor, and the willingness to see the extraordinary without panic. He had learned to improvise, to read subtle cues in alien technology, and to navigate both danger and sarcasm with surprising skill. The Queen watched him with her usual dry amusement. "You have adapted well," she said. "Not perfectly, but commendably." I'll take commendably, Marcus replied, leaning against the console. Better than humiliated, which is the usual outcome. She twitched her ears in what he recognized as a laugh. Your humor is persistent, I admire that. The spacecraft soared through the turbulent atmosphere, leaving the scarred battlefield behind. Below, Corin 7 shrank into a desert of glassy sand and broken metal, a reminder of the chaos they had survived together. Above, stars glimmered in patterns that neither fully understood but both recognized as a canvas for infinite possibilities. Marcus turned to her. So what now? Galactic domination, interstellar diplomacy. Or just making sure no one blows up the next planet we land on? Survival first, she said, glancing at him with that faint, teasing smile. The rest we shall see. Perhaps you will have input on policy, though I warn you. Humans are unpredictable. I'll take my chances, he said. Besides, I already have a taste for unpredictability. You make a good teacher. And you, she replied, make an amusing pupil. They shared a brief, quiet moment as the ship glided into orbit. Marcus realized the absurdity, danger, and humor of their journey had forged an unlikely bond, one of trust, mutual respect, and shared laughter in the face of overwhelming odds. He knew the Queen could conquer worlds, but she had chosen to trust him, and in that trust, he had discovered something more valuable than strategy or power: courage.